And I am the director of the Aviation Museum of New Hampshire, which is at the Manchester Airport. How many people have been to the Aviation Museum in New Hampshire? Wow! But you know what? All the people that haven't been, I want you there. And this will be sort of a commercial for us in a way, because this is sort of an outreach program. We're dedicated to telling the stories of New Hampshire aviation, and there's a lot of great ones, and they're all kind of in our museum. But one that we didn't have much on, or anything on, was the legendary Bronson Potter Greenville Railroad Trestle Fly-Under. And this is to remedy that. And you're all part of that process. So I want to thank you for being here tonight. Tonight's program will not be overly long, but we do want to do a few things first before we show the movie, which is the main attraction. So we'll try and be mindful. I know that it's a full room. So the first thing I want to do is invite anybody who wants to work on yoga poses to come up here. There's plenty of room here. I can do all this. So if anybody wants to come up and just be comfortable on the floor, please feel free to do that. I don't see many little ones here, but kids are welcome too. So I won't walk around too much, so don't worry about getting trampled. So feel free to do that. It should be an informal event here. I mean, this is just a wonderful chance to get together and talk about something that I have a lot of questions about. That's why this is research for us at the museum. So if there are folks still in the hallway, if there's any way to kind of allow them to come in, that would be nice. We didn't expect this. If you can believe it, we were going to hold this across the street in the old town hall. And in that case, we would have had to do it in the parking lot, which actually that wouldn't have been bad because we could have it like a drive-in and show the movie outside. So what you're seeing on the screen are images of Bronson Potter, but also some logos of some local businesses that helped us put this event together. This started out as me making some phone calls to find out if we could learn a little bit about Bronson Potter, and look what happened. This wouldn't be possible without the sponsors who came up with the support we needed to put on this event. And so I want to make sure that you know, you'll see the logo for our major sponsor, Monadnock Security. Is anyone here from Monadnock Security? You can come up and say a few words if you want. No? All right. But it was very generous of you guys to step up and help support this event and the museum's involvement in it. So thank you for that. And if you're not aware of Monadnock Security, I don't have the website, but you're online because I looked at your website. So if any security needs, I think the only thing they do is they probably can't prevent anyone from stealing your heart, but they can keep anything else safe. Is that right? Okay. That's not a bad slogan. You should write that down. All right. And then there's another local business, G.P. Shaw and Son. Anyone here? Wow, they got a hand. If you have waste to be removed, give them a call. And they were very generous in supporting us. Kim Hemmer. Where's Kim? She's got to be here. Is she? Are you here? There you are, right, Kim? I know everybody here has lots of extra money just sitting around, right? And if you do, take it out of the cookie jar. It's not earning you anything there, and give it to Kim, because she works for Edward Jones in Milford, and she will help you retire in style or any other goal you might have. Is that right? Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. She's online too, so you can find her there. So thank you very much, Kim, for stepping up and helping out. And then Dennis DiPaolo. Where's Dennis? Dennis, I don't know if he's here, but he is, I think, a neighbor or former neighbor of Bronson. And as I understand it, he wanted Bronson to be remembered for all the reasons I think we're all here. And he supported us too. So on behalf of the Aviation Museum, I want to thank all of the sponsors for helping make this possible. We also we're a nonprofit, so we're always, this is New Hampshire, so we're always begging for money. We have a big box that is for donations. So if you enjoy tonight's program and want to support what we're doing, which involves taking the Bronson Potter story and making a professional quality video out of this whole event and this whole story, then please give us a donation. Among other things, if we get enough donations, we will get a bigger box. Thank you, I just made that up. Making our documentary, so you're aware of his presence, is Mr. Bill Milios from Backlot Films. He's hard at work with the earphones on there. He looks real busy. But he's actually checking his email, right? Is that what you're doing? Yeah. So Bill is a documentary filmmaker and commercial filmmaker and the director of 2 feature films that were made here in New Hampshire, Dangerous Crosswinds from 2005 and Old Man Dogs from 97. Is that right, Bill? And his website is backlotfilms.com, and he does some terrific work. And he's going to be working with the museum to put together some video that we can tell the story of Bronson's Great Fly Under, one of the legendary achievements now of New Hampshire aviation. So lots to do here tonight. And I said this was going to be research. What I mean by that is this is like a puzzle to me. I grew up in New Hampshire, and I was 15 years old when this event happened. And I seem to have always known about it, long before I ever thought I'd be involved in the aviation museum business. My background is journalism and some other things too. I knew about this. I knew some crazy guy flew his plane under that big old train bridge in Greenville that's like on Route 31 that's no longer there anymore, which kind of added to the mystery of it. This bridge isn't even there anymore, and this guy flew under it. So it's not there, so it becomes this massively huge bridge that's, not there anymore. Of course, it was the highest trestle in New Hampshire for much of its existence, and it was, 700 feet long? Is that right? And there's material about it back there, I think, if you're interested in some of the more, arcane details about it. I knew about it, but what did I know about it? I just knew, as I said, some crazy guy flew a plane under a bridge. You're not supposed to do that. My dad was a pilot. Legend has it that he flew for Northeast Airlines, the old Yellowbirds, and legend has it was among pilots at Northeast Airlines flying into Logan Airport, you were not a real manly pilot unless you flew under the Tobin Bridge. So this whole idea of flying under a bridge is one of these forbidden things that you're not supposed to do, but if you're a real pilot, you end up doing those things. This sort of fit into that category in my mind. I thought, well, that's, it's an interesting story, but, there's no book about it. If you go online now, you can find scraps here and there, but there's different dates and there's different versions of things. And, now I'm in the museum business, we want to try and get the real story. So I thought, well, the way to do that is to, ask people around here what they know. It's been 40 years, that's a long time. But a lot of people who were there are here still. So it's time to get the story straight. So I made a couple of calls, and I said, I forget who I talked with, but I sent out some emails. People were very polite. I said, would it be possible if there'd be any interest in a program about Mr. Bronson Potter at our museum in Manchester? And the answer came back very quickly. No, we're not going to Manchester for that. But if you do something in town, maybe we could get a few people together. So I said, all right, we'll do it, because the Aviation Museum is of New Hampshire, right? So we want to be out and about, and we're not limited to the Manchester airport, though I hope you'll come and visit us. We do have our brochures and our literature here. And in fact, we have a great event coming up just next Saturday. It's called Plane Fest. And if you have a young person in your life who is interested in planes, or even if they're not, come, because Plane Fest involves a Young Eagles program where kids aged 8 to 17 can come and get free rides in small planes with pilots who donate their time and their aircraft to give kids a chance to experience the magic of flight. So that might start a future Bronson Potter on their road to fame and glory. You will not be flying under any bridges, though. We won't be doing that. So that's kind of what we do all year long at the museum. It's a wonderful community of people who love aviation and have a great time doing all kinds of different events. We also try to do educational programs at that same event at the Plane Fest, which involves a lot of other events within the Plane Fest. We're going to have our first ever, how spelling bees are still popular even in today's digital everything age? The old-fashioned spelling bee is like a thing. Kids still love it. So we're going to try and glom onto that and start our first ever geography bee, because aviation and geography kind of go hand in hand. You got to know where you're going to fly your plane. So we're going to do a geography bee where we have a collection of vintage international airline air sickness bags. And those kids are going to get 15 seconds. If it says Air France, they have to find that on a map. And if not, And the grand champion will be crowned, and they'll get to keep the air sickness bag and have a great time. So we're really cutting edge at the Aviation Museum, and I hope you'll get interested and join our community. We have a few folks from the Aviation Museum here. I want to introduce a member of our board of directors, Mr. Bob Huff. Please, there he is. And we have Mr. Merrill Lewis, who came with the museum. He's one of our exhibits, actually, now. There you are, Merrill. He's one of the volunteers. We're an all-volunteer organization. You come visit us. The volunteers are former pilots, air traffic controllers, people with a background in aviation, and they will tell you what you want to hear, what you want to know, tell you stories, take you through. And we have Mr. Robert Fortnum, who's a really big supporter of our museum. Please give him a hand, Mr. Robert Fortnum. Thank you, Robert. So I'll get back to my ongoing commercial in a minute, because there's more to tell you about the Aviation Museum. So what about Bronson Potter? We would like to, we have, if you go into the museum, we have a mural painted in the lobby, which has great figures of New Hampshire aviation, all painted in a beautiful mural by an artist named Rick Freed. And among them, there are some people you'd know, like Alan Shepard, first astronaut from New Hampshire, first American in space. We have Krista McAuliffe, of course. We have some people you haven't heard of, such as Thaddeus Lowe. How many Thaddeus Lowe fans in the audience? All right, couple, yeah. Ballooning, someone heard. He was a guy from New Hampshire who got into the cutting-edge aeronautical field of ballooning in the 1840s and 50s, long before the Wright brothers made their first flight. And he was so good at it, he was picked by none other than Mr. Abraham Lincoln, president, to be chief aeronaut of the Union Army in the Civil War. So this is the guy who was from New Hampshire. He militarized the balloon, and they would take balloons and run them up on tethers and spy on the rebels and see where they were. You didn't have to crawl through the bushes anymore, right? So another New Hampshire pioneer. Bronson Potter is not painted there, but we'd like to figure out what this story really is and see what we can do. We would like to do something about this because it's a great story, I think, about aviation. And so I made these inquiries, and I started asking around. And wouldn't you know, I met a guy named Dave. Where's Dave? Where'd you go, Dave Morrison? There he is. We're trying to, you got people outside watching us. Wow. So Dave was emailing me, and he was rummaging through things because he had been at that fly under, and it turned out that Dave had been taking movies that day, which I guess he sort of didn't really, think about for a long time. But where are those movies? Oh, I'll go look for them, and he found them. So, like this legendary thing, suddenly we have actual footage of it, and we wanted to show it tonight and give people a chance to experience it if you were not there. So I have a question. How many people were at the fly under and are here today? We're gonna see, you may be seeing yourself, and you may be a bit surprised by what you see, captured by Mr. Morrison's camera on Sunday, July 22nd, 1979. So we'll get to the film in a little bit. But I look at this is a puzzle to me. And like any puzzle, there's lots of pieces, and you really don't see the picture until you put all the pieces together. So I need some pieces to this puzzle. And that's why people are here tonight. I hope if people have pieces that we can hear about and share a couple of stories here and there that maybe you have but no one else knows about, I would like to hear from you. We have a couple of microphones. Dave can come find you, or you can come up here and talk a little bit about it. To get us started, I would like to invite, on a serious note, there's a woman named Liz, who's from the Conservation Commission, and I don't know where she wound up. There you are. Could you please come up and just talk a little bit about something that captured my attention? One thing about this story that I felt really was important was the gravestone, which, it's online and you see it and you go, oh my God, it's carved in his gravestone, this beautiful, you've seen photos of it up behind me. And I thought, well, that must have been so important to him to have that be put on his stone that it's really part of the story of a long life and a lot of things he did. That is on his gravestone, so it must have been that important to him. I had it, as a former journalist, of course I had it all wrong. And I was somewhat corrected and instructed by Liz. So would you care to tell the real story about that and talk a little bit about his Conservation Commission role?
Okay, well, he was never on the Conservation Commission. Sometimes he had run-ins with the Conservation Commission. But we always parted friends. But how Bronson got his gravestone. He had no intention of a gravestone. He told me before he died, he was giving his body. Oh, is that better? Okay. He was giving his body to Harvard Medical School, and he says they can do what they like with it. He wasn't going to fuss about that. But then when he died, not that long after, we were amazed when his will was read. And he had given all his land that he owned, over 600 acres, to the towns in which that land was. And most of it was in Mason, and some was in Greenville, right on the line near where he lived on Greenville Road. And it was like, wow, Bronson, what a man. But, so it turned out, of course, the will was contested. And it was contested for 3 years. He died in '04, and it wasn't until '07 that New Hampshire Supreme Court said his will stood. He knew what he was doing, his will stood. So, oh, it's not loud? Oh, am I not?
No, I said thank you, Bronson.
Oh yeah, I know, it was wonderful. But all that time, since he died, his house had been closed. And I don't know if anybody had ever visited while he was alive. I'm sure some of you might have. It was closed up very tight. And he'd given all his possessions to the fire department because he was a member of the fire department, and they put a flag on his grave. They were the first to mark his grave because for all those years, while the will was contested, he had no gravestone. And we all felt bad about that because all he'd done for the town. So when the fire department said no thank you, they didn't want his house or what was in it. So it's like, oh my God, the Conservation Commission, he gave a lot for conservation, it's our job. So we went in and cleaned out his house, and we found there was some really interesting things there that we could have a yard sale. So we had a yard sale, there's a poster of it in the back there, and people came, and we raised enough money for a gravestone. And we always wanted to put his flight on the gravestone, but we didn't know where a good picture was. And sure enough, to the yard sale came Dave Burgo from Greenville. And he got talking to Bob LaRochelle, which I don't know if Bob's here tonight. He's the chairman of the Conservation Commission. He was then, still is. He's a very, long-serving man. He's good. And so what happened was Dave went home, got his picture, Bob took it and scanned it, and then we were able to have Medlin Monument inscribe it on his gravestone in that beautiful rendition that they did. Medlin Monument does a great job. It's all we do plugs for things. They're in Milford. So that's how Bronson got his gravestone.
I think I heard a question while she was speaking, who contested the will? I believe it was the family members, is that right? And I know, anyone's life has ups and downs, and Bronson's is no exception, and I think he got a lot of people angry with things he did from time to time. We may hear of that a little bit tonight. That's all part of the story too. So, if that's kind of what you remember, that's okay to share that as well. I have written, the very first thing I have written on my notes is salty language. And that's because there will be some things that you might hear that, it's not, I'd say PG at the best at this point. So Bronson was an inventor. And I don't know if you've been able to see what's back there, but there are a few examples of some of the things. Is his wind-powered toothbrush here tonight? No, we couldn't get that? What do we have there, Dave? Can you tell us a little bit? Just so people know afterwards if you want to see what's on the back table.
Yeah. There are some of his wood picks. He got into a kick where he's trying to, because he didn't want to bend over to pick up the wood anymore. So he had all these wood picks he started working on. He had 40 or 50 of them. There's one of them there. he had quite a few of them. I ended up with 4 or 5 of them. And I forgot to bring a piece of wood down to stick them in, but some of them work, some of them don't. But he was making prototypes. There is a horn there. Some of you guys might remember he used to put a horn in somebody's hands and take a picture. Thank you. You guys are great back there. Just pick them up every now and then, right? And that was, I don't know what that was. It was a version of it, I guess. The thing is all dried up and everything. That is Bob Dilberger's peeper. I don't know what you call that. But it's rigged up, one of his circuit things is rigged up to a Christmas card. When you open those Christmas cards and they play Christmas tunes, it's rigged up to that. That one's mine. That's my peeper. It used to peep about every 45 seconds, just go beep, beep. And I had that in my house for about, I don't know, how long it was, Deb, before you went crazy? Too long. So I had to put it out in the woodshed. And this was years after Bronson was dead, actually. And then Jaden, who's 15 now, he was about 3 then, he wanted to see how it worked and pulled it apart. So it's been quiet. John Lewicki put it back together, but we still got to work out the bugs there. What else is back there? Anything interesting? Oh, I wanted to bring down my, yeah, that's another one of those wood things. Wanted to bring, that's a wood thing too. I was walking up on Greenville Road once, sweeping the road or something. He came driving up beside me and stopped. Said, "Hey, Morrison, you want to hear something?" "Sure." So he took out a propane torch and a piece of PVC pipe, and he had a little piece of screen wrapped on the end of a pencil, basically. He took the propane torch and heated up the screen, and then he shoved it up the pipe, and it went, "Oh, what is that? It's cool." He told me it was some kind of an effect. I could never remember what it was, actually. I call it the Fig Newton effect. So I call it the Fig Newton horn. And actually, which I wanted to bring down here, but I couldn't talk to Debbie into going back to get it, was that for my birthday once, he made me like, I don't know, it's like 5 or 6 of them all glued together. Because I was talking about it, I said, "What if you made different length horns, different sizes, you know, if it would sound different?" "Oh, there's an idea." And he glued them all together with liquid, what is that? Liquid nails. That was his favorite. So, yeah, very interesting. Where did we start this? I can't remember. So he does have some things back there, and there's a few more things that aren't here. But hopefully you guys got some good stories.
Well, the one thing that most people know, but in case you don't, he was independently wealthy by virtue of his expertise in electronics, I understand. He was a Harvard graduate, and as a young man was on the cutting edge. Came up with a few innovative early electronics things that were later used by the Polaroid company. It was if you used to get one of their cameras, it would make a beeping sound, and the component that did that was his. And I believe the story goes that they did that and didn't get any kind of permission from him or grant any royalty. So he took them to court or somehow legally challenged it and wound up getting paid, I think, was it 6 cents for every Polaroid camera that got sold, which was a nice, healthy, tidy sum right then and there. And there were several other things like that that he did that had widespread implications. You never think of it, but someone had to invent it, and someone should have got paid for it, and it was sometimes Bronson Potter. And so that's why he was able to live the life he lived here in Mason and in the environs. I'm going to share a thing that might, you can tell me if you've got a story that can top this, because this is from something a guy in Keene sent me just yesterday. And this guy's name is, does anyone know him? Jack Coey? Sound familiar? No, he's a writer. And he did like a 20-page short story about Bronson Potter based on, he made up this imaginary conversation, but it's mostly people at the Greenville VFW, apparently. Legion, sorry. All right. And in it, he threaded in some of the stories that he heard, apparently, in just talking about this with people some time ago when he wrote this. And so one of the stories is about something called the sanitary waste disposal packets. Anyone know about this? This was going to change the world. This was a disaster relief invention that Bronson Potter invented for all of humanity. In the event of a natural disaster or catastrophe, people still have to go to the bathroom. And that can be a problem if you have no sewer system and nowhere to go. Bronson was coming to the rescue with the sanitary waste disposal packet. And the way he wrote it here, it says, his idea was that after a disaster, man-made or natural, it would be an efficient, sanitary way to dispose of human waste. It's actually something that you'd think that's not a bad idea. If it worked, it would do a great deal toward eliminating disease and infection. He liked to have people test his inventions, of course, after he developed them, before submitting them to Washington. So in this case, the sanitary waste disposal packet was a cardboard box that the user squatted over, did his or her business, and then when he was done, would fold up the box. The box had holes in it to allow for aerobic bacterial decomposition, aided by, it says here, limestone, that would accelerate the process. So you have a self-contained disposal unit that no one would get sick from or anything. Or the box could be burned. There was also toilet paper provided to clean oneself. So the narrator says, like I said, Bronson liked to test his inventions. So he was going around town asking everybody, would you like to shit in my box? Can you top that? Are there any stories? Anyone? I mean, you've lived here all these years, I haven't. Tell us some stories. Tell us your name.
Winslow Pagian from New Ipswich. Friend of mine at the workplace was at Bronson's tin shack. And he had to go to the bathroom. So he rolled out some newspaper, did his business on it, rolled it up, and threw it in the stove, burnt it up.
That's a prototype for that invention. Wow. I hope this isn't a theme tonight, but still. But I understand there was a wind-powered toothbrush.
I never had time to use that.
I never had time to use it. All right. Well, you may be lucky. In the back, can you bring the microphone back? There's a gentleman back there who, I'm sure folks know everybody's name, but I'm the stranger in town, so I apologize I don't know everybody.
Hi, that's Donovan from Greenville. These aren't long stories, just two memories. One day when I was driving down Pleasant Street in Greenville, all of a sudden I look to my right and I see Bronson walking down the street with his cow. And he's just walking down the street, moseying along with his cow. I just drove by thinking nothing because that was Bronson. A little while later, I drove by the Legion, and there was the cow tied up outside. The other story is just as quick, and probably the Mason residents would have a better handle on this one. But Bronson had a Volkswagen Beetle, and those of you who know about Volkswagen Beetles know they didn't have a very good heater system. So he ripped out the back seat and whatever else he had to rip out. And I don't know whether it was a coal stove or a wood stove, but he had it right in the back with a pipe going out the ceiling. And obviously, there's somebody that remembers that.
Okay. All right, we have one more coming up. All right. Thank you.
No, that's not what happened.
Okay.
Bronson, with the seat still intact in the back.
Can you put the mic up to you?
Okay.
There you
is
go.
that it?
Yeah, thank you.
Here, with the seat still intact, had a propane bottle from a grill without a regulator. He cracked the valve and light it and drive it around. Now, Volkswagens go up in flame real easy. And another car story, I could go on for hours. I was down at Blanchard's and talking to Kenny, rest his soul. At any rate, we hear this rifle shot. And what the heck was that? And in the driveway comes Bronson with his car with the rear window shot out. And he was blaming us for it and thought we should buy him a new rear window. Actually, how was it for rainy day the camera one day? I was probably 14 years old, and this weird mountain man comes in. And I'm just a kid that doesn't know nothing, you know. And he says to the salesman, "What's that camera up there?" He goes, "Oh, that's a new Polaroid camera." He says, "Really? Let me take a look at it." So he looks at it, drags it down, says, "How much is it?" Guy goes, $800. Now at this point in time, I believe minimum wage was 45 cents an hour. That was a lot of money. So he pays the guy $800, whips out a toolkit, rips the camera apart, takes this little part and goes, "I thought so. This is mine." Meantime, you know, the salesman's jaw is about on the counter. And he turns around to leave and says, "Sir, what about your camera?" He says, "Oh, you can keep that. I got what I need." The really strange part about that is I grew up with a family. They're still very close to me. Their father was the man who was in charge of Polaroid's patent division. And Bronson sued basically my friend's dad and won. So, like I said, I could go on.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you could hold the mic right up and speak loudly.
And responsible for having brought Bronson Potter here. Potter and I were very close friends for maybe a decade or two. And my wife and I could go on for a decade, for hours on the subject of Potter. But I would tell on you about mischief that you made. And the first one is how he got kicked out of Harvard. Another one, flying garbage cans. Another one would be the beginning of the Sun Alert. I can tell you a lot about the Sun Alert because I was part of all this, and people who sued Polaroid was Fish and Richardson, and the fellow who patented it was Jack Williams, was the people I presented to Potter. And so then there was the stealing of the stone lions.
Well, as an aviation museum person, I'm interested in the flying garbage can. What was that?
Then there's the driving my car down on the cliffs of Truro and firing them, and then the police coming over and you know, I can't. Before the police, it was the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard couldn't land. And I don't remember how many others. Then there was the barrel organ story, and we made, you know, I have dozens of incredible stories.
Okay, well, is there a flying garbage can story you mentioned?
Yes, but it's a short one.
The short one is good.
You remember that one? No. Oh, well, you take a plain ordinary garbage can and some gasoline, and you swish the gasoline inside of the garbage can, and you quickly put it upside down with a proper ratio of air and gasoline, and you make a gutter where you put gasoline, and when you're far enough away, you light it up, and the gasoline explodes into the garbage can, and it flies.
That's American ingenuity right there. We can do that out in the parking lot right now. Anyone got a garbage can? Yes.
Kira had a sister, my wife.
Yes.
And she came to visit us a week before getting married and spent a lot of time with Bronson Potter and his grandson. When she left to get married, well, Potter was not invited to the wedding. Potter and I had worked together at Block Associates. And Potter hooked up an electric circuit that went which, and he stuffed it inside of a kitty cat, you know, peluche, I call it a children's cat.
Okay.
And it kept on ringing. And I realized, and it was wrapped in newspaper, and it was to be given as his wedding present to the bride. it was version, the cat gets swallowed the canary.
Oh, all right, that's clever.
So how am I going to get that to a customer? So I stuffed it in the freezer, wrapped it in wallpaper, and the customer, it was quiet.
In the freezer.
Yeah, well, it was the system was
That cooled
freezed.
it, okay, so it stops making its tweeting noise.
So we took it to the, got to the wedding and gave it to the bride and put it on the back, and after it told, it started talking, and there was some objection to that from the mother of the bride, and it wrapped in the newspaper. So I suggest we put it in the freezer, it will shut up.
Yes.
And so that was done, and we agreed, and everything was quiet, and everybody, the wedding kept going. And the next morning, in the garbage can, we hear, tweet, tweet, tweet.
Thrown it out.
The man of the bride did not approve.
Boom, and it again.
I can go on like this.
Thank you. Tell me your name again. What is your name again?
My name
Yes.
is Coco Montague.
Okay, Montague. So Bill, yes, we'd love to talk to you some more afterwards.
I
Like
have a
some.
few written stories.
Excellent, that's good. Thank you. All right, well, that was great. How about I feel like Phil Donahue here. Is there anyone with we got a repeat here, yes. That reminds us, one more story.
Bronson proposed marriage to my stepsister. She did typing and proofreading for his articles. My father said that he didn't have a belt. He used a necktie wrapped around his waist and tied in a knot to hold his pants up. She never accepted it.
Yes, sir. Dave, there's a gentleman. Come on up and right into the microphone.
Hi, I'm Tom Lubica. I'm from New Ipswich. I am probably one of the only people who was at the fly under that didn't see it. I was driving the ambulance backing down an access road to get close to where the destruction was going to happen. And I think Bronson flew under like 15 minutes earlier than he said he was going to. But the other story, really the one I want to tell is, you people from Mason will remember Bob Marshall. Yeah. He was the chairman of the board of directors for the ambulance service. And he stopped by to see Bronson once. I guess they were friends. And Bronson was in the middle of blowing up some stumps from his property. And he was using dynamite for that purpose. He had the dynamite underneath the stumps, wires back to this car that people keep talking about with no doors and no back seat. And he had a battery between his legs as he was seated on a case of dynamite, ready to put these wires to the terminals to blow this stump up. And Bob at that point says, "I'll come back later."
Thank you. Wow. Thank you. Step right up. All stories welcome.
Okay, I am Jill Hopkins. My father was George. He was a police officer in Greenville
Right,
many,
you gotta
many
keep the
years
microphone.
ago. Many, many years ago. I used to work for the Greenville Post Office, and Mr. Porter came in one time. He had wool pants on, flannel shirt, suspenders on. And I am not shy. I will speak out if something is amiss with somebody. And Mr. Porter's fly was down. So I walked out from behind the counter and approached him, and I said, "Mr. Porter, sir," I says, "your fly is down." So he zipped up his fly, and every time he saw me, I was considered the zipper girl.
Thank you. I wonder if that's where the fly under this morning. Thank you. I'm here all night. I will. There's a person in the door. I want to just, there's one other story from the thing the guy sent me from Keene, which is about the car that we've been talking about. There's a story of a lawyer colleague told me about Bronson and him flying from Logan Airport in Boston to Texas and back. Bronson drove them to Logan in that VW he had, which had an ignition key, but he'd lost the door key. And when he parked his car in the lot at Logan, Tom noticed he didn't lock it. Tom said, "Bronson, are you sure you want to leave that unlocked? This is Boston, not Greenville, remember?" And Bronson says, "Oh, hell, I guess you're right." And so he took the steering wheel off the car and put it in his suitcase. So they flew to Texas, did their business, then flew home. They landed at Logan, and the airline announced that the luggage had all been left back in Texas. So Tom says, "Looks like we're spending the night in Boston." Bronson says, "Like hell we are." And he went out to the car and he took a pair of vice grips from the trunk and they drove back to New Hampshire with Bronson steering the VW from the side of the steering column with vice grips. It says, Tom said they thought they were dead a couple of times. I love that. So there was there another one over here somewhere? Oh, come on right up. Step up and testify.
So hi, my name is Kathy Fedork. I used to be Kathy Hudson. I grew up in Mason.
Can we all hear her? I think you have to eat that microphone. Like, well, let me give you,
Mine seems to work better.
I can yell. Hello. Oh, that's nice. So my name's Kathy Fedork. I'll put that back in the chat. I grew up here. I grew up here in Mason. Can you hear me now? Standard operating procedure. One of the stories that I haven't heard yet, and all of these are all neat and cool things and interesting things that Bronson did. One of the things Bronson did one year, I was in 3rd grade, he made a music box for the entire elementary school. And we were all outside playing like we always did. And all of a sudden he comes in his truck. He had a truck at that point that was welded together from two trucks. So the front was one color and the back was another. So he came down very quietly and he smiled at all of us and he backed in. And inside this thing is a big cast iron tube. And it's painted, it's psychedelic, you know, it's like 1968, so what do you think it looked like, okay? And it had a crank from an old Ford on it, and it had holes at the top, and it had holes a couple ways down all the way around the thing. And he got it out, and he dragged it out of there and plopped it on the ground. And he said, we all stood there, we were at recess, and we were like, "Mr. Potter, what is this?" He said, "It's a music box, turn the crank." So we did. And it actually played, he had set it up just like it would be a music box if it was one that you had on your dresser. It had gears inside of it, and knobs, and you know, the metal bars that make the sound. And when you cranked it, it would make a beautiful song, and it could play 3. And this is something he made for the children of Mason. And we had it for about 2 years, and then one day he came up quietly and took it away. He was great. I spent a lot of time at his house with his daughter growing up because we used to play together when she would visit. And he made really, really good peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. And we sat there amongst the wrenches and the culture and everything, and we all ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches together. It was fun. So anyway, he was fun.
Mr. Montague's going to fill us in. Okay.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes.
Potter and another fellow, Dick Bark, and I decided to, this was Potter's initiative, to make a barrel organ that was really running a tape recorder. And the idea was to start with barrel organ music and then evolve into classical music of the 14th century and then fully orchestrated operas. and then people would follow, and they just a barrel organ. And we built that, and Dick Park gave pieces of his accordion to decorate it so it looked like a real genuine barrel organ. And we would go around town playing the barrel organ, and we each had a part into that, and collecting money, and then I hear long stories on that. And then it evolved that into a music box that was built for New York City, and so on.
Wow.
And,
Thank you, Mr. Donahue.
I think it is. It's really warm in here, and I think people are like, I know it's a little lunch, and what I really want to do is make sure that the one question I was hoping to get an answer to is if anybody can tell me their version of why he flew his plane under that railroad trestle. And I've heard a bunch of different things. Can anyone volunteer? It doesn't have to be true or correct. Because I'll make the point later, there is no truth in this because it's such an interesting, multifaceted stunt. So anyone have any theories? Does anyone, you have one? Well, come on, let me just pass this down. Don't knock over the guy's crutch.
With my father having been a police officer in Greenville, he had told me, I was a very young girl at the time, that Bronson was going to be losing his pilot's license. So by what I have been told, is Bronson called the FAA and said, I know you're going to pull my license, this is how I'm going out. And he flew his plane, and I have been told that there was state police there, witnessing on the road, traffic, people. And when he was done, he went to his airstrip that he has up on, I think it's called Greenville Road. And he landed his plane there, and the FAA was there to pull his license. If anybody can verify that or have a little bit more truth to it, that's what I have always understood for the last, I will say, 40 plus years.
Yeah, we're down to one working mic, so we'll do the best we can. Tell us another version of that story.
I believe that version is correct, but I also heard that he heard that the FAA was coming, so he postponed his flight for a period of time, maybe a week or a month. My father took home movies of the flight, and he didn't get as good a perspective as somebody else might have gotten. But when Bronson landed, the FAA was there to take his license.
Okay, well, we got two working mics, all right. Yes, we do. And there's someone back there. That would be great. And I'd like to do that, this part of the program, and we're going to just take a quick interlude while we get set to show the movie. We'll have another tune from our friends, the Dirty Double Crossers, so get ready where did they go? Come on in, get ready. Come on. And that'll get us ready to show the big movie. And we have a special surprise that did we have the surprise, Dave? You found it again? Okay, so we have the surprise. All right, we'll tell you the surprise about that in a minute. Mac, yes, please share us what you can.
So my dad, we live on Greenville Road. My dad was an airplane pilot for Pan American for many years, and Bronson was at our house and said he is going to fly underneath the bridge. And my dad said, you're going to lose your license. And he said, well, that's okay, because the best way to go out. So after he did it, he came up with, Bronson always walked around with a big jug of wine, and came to our house, put the jug down, and said, there you go, I did it, and I lost my license, great way to go.
Wow. Tell us your father's name just so we know that. Can you tell us your name just so that we have that?
My dad's name was Al Greenwood.
Al Greenwood, okay. What's your name?
Suzanne DeRocher.
Suzanne DeRocher, nice to meet you. Any other versions of this? I have a version I'm going to share with you before we go to the Dirty Double Crossers.
And I think this is, again, from that material that was sent to me. And it actually covers a lot of the bigger themes that come out of something like this. Because, yeah, he flew his plane under a trestle, but you know what he did? He did something that accidentally, or maybe on purpose, was kind of a work of performance art. in that he brought a bunch of people together when it first happened, and we all shared in that experience, all that were there. 40 years later, we're still talking about it, and there's no one way to interpret it. Like any great work of art, you can see it many different ways, and people find what they want from it. So there's a passage here that talks a bit about the reason that it's believed that he decided to go out. This confirms some of the things that are in here. He decided this was going to be his last flight, but why? And the reason is contained in here. If anyone can say they can confirm this, I'd love to hear it. This is from that story, and it's talking a little bit about Bronson's fondness for alcohol. It says, I don't know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I mean, I don't know whether the alcoholism was part of his temperament or separate from it. Temperamentally, Bronson was self-absorbed, which impedes intimacy with others. So does that inability to connect with others cause the alcoholism? Or would it be there if he had been happily married? I don't know. I know of other men temperamentally like Bronson, William Faulkner, Eugene O'Neill. They were alcoholic, so the temperament seems to lend itself to the disease, but that's as far as I've gotten. There are plenty of married men who are alcoholics, said Jean, who's in this story. Oh, for sure. As I say, I don't know. It's my observation totally. Proportionally, there may be a greater incidence of alcoholism in these interpersonal temperaments than there are in interpersonal temperaments. That doesn't make any sense. But these men also seem to have a death wish, which Bronson's fly under could be interpreted as. There is a paradox in their personality of being highly creative on one side and highly destructive on the other. Well, you're getting pretty heavy there, Regis said. That's the thing about a man like Bronson. He was so multifaceted. And there's a story here about a wood stove that was made out of a bathtub turned upside down. Anyone recognize that? It would allow him to have heat overnight without tending to it. He had like a whole trunk or a stump underneath it. So he had so much stuff in his house. With a mind like his, you never know how that stuff will be used. I mean, using a hairdryer as a bellows or a vice grips as a steering wheel. We look at an object and see 1 or 2 uses for it. He sees 5 or 6 or 7. Like I said, I think he looked at the trestle and he knew he could do it, said Jean. I've never heard what gave him the idea, said Regis. The story around town is that it was a bet of some kind, said Jean. I bet Frenchie could tell us. Frenchie's in the story. Frenchie stopped being busy. The men waved him over. Frenchie, do you know anything about how Bronson got the idea for the fly under? Asked John. Here's Frenchie. Oui. Oui. He was sitting where you are now. And I'll stop the accent. Mike O'Toole said that the railroad was shutting down, and unless the town wanted that trestle, they would tear it down. And Bronson said he could fly a plane under it. And O'Toole laughed at him. And Bronson got mad and said, I'll bet you $100 I can fly a plane under that. And O'Toole said, you're on. So the wager was all anybody could talk about, and it was the talk of the club for about a week after that. Many of the jokesters saying how Bronson couldn't stay sober long enough to catch a bus, never mind fly a plane under the trestle. I watched these men laugh, and I know they are jealous of him because the truth was he was successful and wealthy. And I had no doubt he knew what he was doing because he is, the story says, un homme intelligent, smart guy. And O'Toole is the biggest blowhard in town, said Lyle. He was drunk, I know he was, grumbled Claude, and it goes a bit. So actually, I've heard another version of what happened, and this is the thing. You ready? There was this man named Eugene Flatters, who was an elderly flight instructor at the Fitchburg Airport, who taught Bronson how to fly. Bronson and this man developed a very close relationship. I'm thinking he was a surrogate father for Bronson, that sort of thing. Eugene died, and Bronson was heartbroken, and because of that, vowed to never fly again. He wanted, therefore, his last flight to be a spectacular one, and flying under the trestle would certainly be that. 11 feet of clearance on each wing, said Regis. Can you imagine the nerve it took to do that? So he became more isolated and more withdrawn after the death of Flatters. And there's some memories about, watching the fly under. My wife and I stood on the shore of the Sauhegan River with 100 other people, all in a festive and carnival mood. It felt like we were about to witness a once-in-a-lifetime event. like seeing a hole-in-one or a perfect game or hearing a politician give a Gettysburg Address type of speech. A defining moment that lives in the memory of witnesses forever. We heard the plane from far off, and we all looked up at the sky, and many of us with our hand over our eyes to block the sun. It looked like we saluted God coming into our midst. Finally, we could barely make out the plane, and a murmur went through the crowd, and when the plane gained greater definition, a cheer rose from the crowd in homage to what they were about to witness. About 50 kids were on the trestle, waving their arms and dancing. Wow. There were those electrical wires in front of the trestle, and we all caught our breath as the plane approached. And the plane cleared the wires and dropped down, and Bronson pulled up before going underneath the trestle. And he circled around and made another pass, but again, pulled up. There was a murmuring in the crowd. Spectators thought he'd lost his nerve. Until the police came out onto the trestle and ordered the kids off. Bronson made a third pass and pulled up again while the cops were getting the kids off of that trestle. He came around again and went under the trestle this time, and the shout of excitement went through the crowd. It was exhilarating to see. It really was. I got goosebumps. There was a streak of white paint on the side of the trestle that Billy Jones said that Bronson figured out where exactly half the distance was between the two pylons, and smashed a gallon of white paint at that exact point so he would know where to point the nose of his plane. Billy said that Bronson had 11 feet on each wingtip to make it. A gust of wind would have been a disaster. It was something to see, it really was. Looking back on it, it was the last time I can think of when we were all for the same thing. No one on that riverbank that Sunday wanted Bronson to fail. There are very few times in life where everybody wants the same thing. And that was one of them. And I think all of us who were lucky enough to see it had an event that doesn't happen very often and is getting harder and harder to find as society gets more and more complicated. Every man in the room listened to Regis. There was silence. A man spoke. I was 16 that day, and I was on the trestle until the cops chased us off. And I can tell you, they weren't messing around. They were angry and wanted us off that trestle like we would see something we weren't supposed to see. If the plane went under us, we could see who was in the cockpit. And I wondered if that was it. The cops say it was for our safety. Maybe that's so, but I know there are people who don't think Bronson would have been sober enough to ever have flown the plane that day. So I don't know. The men were silent. The grassy knoll. It was Bronson, said Regis quietly. He raised his glass, and all the men except Claude did the same. They say when the FAA officials found him, he handed them his license and said, "You can have it." That was my last flight, and as far as I know, he never flew again. Okay, I do need to ask 2 more questions that we want answers to. Can anyone tell us what plane, what's the brand or make of the plane that he was flying? Does anyone know for sure? Because we keep hearing Aranca, Piper Cub. Can anyone tell us for sure? It was a Cessna. What was it? Do we know for sure? Was it an Aranca? Is that what I'm hearing? An Aranca Champ. All right. We've had people at our museum go, that's what it was, so that kind of confirms that. Anyone else? Yes? A Piper Cub. Wow. All right.
Is Joe doing here?
All right, well, we're going to have to look. We're going to just research that because it's kind of important. I said it was a Piper Cub, and everyone made fun of me because they said, no, it's an Aranca. And then, we've been trying to find that out. Also, we've been informed of a rumor that Bronson was not alone when he made the great fly under. He had with him another person. And all we know is, legend has it, that other person was wearing a chicken mask. Is that something anyone knows about? If you do, see us later, because that's something we'd like to unravel. Who was the chicken man? And we may catch a glimpse of him as we'll see. We'll be looking for that as we do this fly under. So one more thing about our aviation museum. which is the organization sponsoring this, and I'm director of it, you see this sort of big blue thing over here. And there's Sean from Channel 9. How about a hand? Yay! Okay. Sean, I'm going to ask you to be the Vanna White here. Would you reach in front of you and sort of bang on that and make a sound? Oh! That is metal. That is aircraft aluminum. That is part of an airplane, and that airplane is being built by students at the Manchester School of Technology, high school students building an actual flyable all-metal airplane. Not a rubber band model plane, but a two-seater RV-12IS light sport aircraft. It's our big initiative at the museum. It's something we're fundraising for. This is going to give kids a chance. Thank you, another Vanna White. Wow. It's going to give kids in Manchester and the surrounding communities a chance for some hands-on experience. It takes the STEM learning, the math and the science, out of the classroom, puts it in the workshop, and the kids are going to be working side by side with a team of volunteer mentors from our museum community. These are people with a long experience with aircraft. Some of them built their own aircraft. And what a great thing that is to have kids work with adults who are not authority figures, but who are just going to be helping them, like their uncle. Come in and work with them, they're not grading them, and it's just a great knowledge transfer that is being facilitated by this program. This was a sample vertical stabilizer we built to just practice, but the build will commence right after Labor Day weekend, and by Memorial Day we should have a finished flyable plane that you'll be reading about and hearing about, built entirely by high school students. And the great part is they'll sell the plane when it's done and get the money and then build another plane. So it's a self-sustaining program, but we have to get it started, so we're raising money for that. If you'd like to support it, give us a donation or take some of the literature and be involved any way you can, because it's kind of like a barn raising except a plane instead of a barn. Everybody helps out. So, I want to give a chance. There's Charlie, the selectman. Is he here? In the back? All right, how about that? And I had some correspondence with a woman, I don't know, I can't remember her name, maybe she's here, but she described how she goes to the land, it's conservation land, and it's got, where she goes, there's some views of Mount Monadnock, I think. And this would have been sold and full of condos or developed in some way probably by now, but instead it's preserved for everyone to enjoy in its natural state. And that made me think, well, that's, it's not just conservation land that's out somewhere that nobody uses. It's truly a community asset for Mason, and I think part in Greenville as well. So it was a real gift that he gave the town. It's not just something that didn't matter to people. It still does even today. All right, so the movie. This is so a couple quick words of explanation. This is before the home media revolution that we've all lived through now. We can do anything now with home media. You can watch movies, you can stream. This was in the age of Super 8mm film. And Super 8mm film had made its way to Mason and Greenville. Dave Morrison here had a camera, and he brought it with him. And there was another guy named Jeff. Where is he? There's Jeff. I never met Jeff. There he is. So this is a dual effort. These were two guys who had their cameras with them on the day of the great fly under, and they turned their cameras on, and we're going to see the results. But Dave, a couple words.
Thank you.
There's two.
Yeah, I don't know how we heard about it, but we heard about it. Jeff and I said, let's go do it. So Jeff was filming from the top, so anything you see from the top is Jeff's camera, and I was down the bottom. And we spliced it together afterwards, and you could see all the dust and all the scratches because it was not very professional. But we said, we'll put everything in and then we'll cut it out later. We never cut it out. And we made some VHS copies of it. And when Jeff started fishing around to do this, I said, well, let me look at the copy of it. And I looked at the copy, which was a copy of a copy of a copy, and everybody was fuzzy about out to here. So we decided to put it on DVD, which is nice and easy. What else? Oh, it was lost for a while. It was, it was kind of cool when it happened, and some people wanted some copies, and Pat Letourneau made some copies for us, so certain people had them around. Marcel might have had some on his website over there. And, but then I moved from Jed's Lane up to Greenville Road, and it got stashed away. And when he said, let's do this, and I said, well, where's the original film? I had to look. For a couple of weekends, I was digging around every corner in the house I could think of. Finally found it in the woodshed. Dug it out. Yep, it's still good. So we put it on DVD, and this is what you're going to see tonight. It's about 4 minutes and 12 seconds. And it is what it is. There's a few people that were here. There's Ray Burgo, he was there. Henry was there, I believe? Nope.
Okay.
I didn't see you anyway.
All right, and there's no soundtrack. It was just Kodak color 8mm film. The color survived pretty well, considering sometimes it all fades out pretty quickly. So wherever you stored it, you did a good job. And
In the dark.
because it is silent, you may know in one of my other lives, I am the silent film accompanist at the Wilton Town Hall Theater. So we're going to do live music for his film to kind of punch it up a little bit. So we'll see if John Williams gets green with envy with what we're able to do here. And what we'll do, also, what I love about this is that it's such a time capsule. You're going to see, never mind the 50th anniversary of Woodstock this year. This is equal to anything when you see what people look like hanging around the Trestle in 1979. And what you will see may surprise and astound you, so get ready for anything. And we'll show it, I think we'll have time to show it twice to make sure people can see it. And then we have a special surprise after that. So are we ready? Yeah. Okay, so Dave, I'll leave it to you, but we need to get the lights. And give me 1 second to set my keyboard up.
Whoa! I gotta push the button.
mic go?
I want to know, how many people saw themselves in that movie? How many people?
I see a few folks. All right, were you surprised at what you look like? All right, any of the ladies who were in the film here? What was going on in Greenville? Wow, in the upper reaches of the Souhegan River Valley. What a blast from the past. So now we can, yes. Did anyone see the white paint on the granite pillar? I think, was it on the metal part or on the trestle? Oh, so he could like gauge where he was, okay. So, all right, so he could kind of aim at that, all right. So, yes, in the back.
Are there any representatives here from the FAA?
Yes, this is not sanctioned by the Aviation Museum of New Hampshire, but we don't promote such behavior. So we can do two things. I want to tell you we have a surprise. Is it ready to go? Do we know? Okay, cue it up. So the surprise is, well, we'll see how it happens. The surprise is that there were more people apparently with movie cameras at this fly under, and just, what, 2 days ago? When did this?
Yeah, not too long.
Yeah, we just discovered another film of what we just saw, and it has a soundtrack with bad words on it. And so I'm not sure if we're going to be able to hear them or not. But
It's been remedied.
it's been remedied, I'm told. Okay. So it's going to be queued up, and we'll hear possibly some sound if everything here works, and it'll be a whole new perspective.
All right, here we go. All right, this looks like that's Route 31. Get the lights down, and I'll try not to be over. They were on the top of the bridge.
The railroad trestle was there until 1984, when I guess the service stopped in 1972, and the bridge was just there. Now all that's left are the granite pillars. There's your Mercedes with interviewing some suspects. And here he comes. That's the best view of the plane we've had so far. Wow!
Nice to hear the plane.
Goes under the wires and hits with the bridge.
I didn't see any chickens.
It looks like nobody's in the cockpit. That'd be a spectacular feat. That's the third one, so I think we're coming in for the real event.
Here he goes.
Oh my God! Wow! That was the fly under as an impressionist painting. That was great.
Thank you,